Bigfoot Adventure. I always forget William Henry, but he's first. Technically, he was born in Virginia, but he lived here, so we call him ours. Then, Unconditional Surrender Grant, Rutherford B., Garfield, not the cat. The other Harrison, Ben. Who could forget William McKinley? Big Willie Howie Taft. But the last one was Warren G. Goddamn Harding. Can you believe that? It's a travesty. We're like the Montreal Canadiens. Our rafters are full of banners we won when there were 6 teams in the league. But they still count. And you know what? Not one of those 8 are from Shaker Heights. LeBron brought a basketball trophy back to Ohio. Imagine how big I'll be when I bring the presidency back. I will say, it is off to a bit of an ignominious start. But so many of the best stories start that way. All chapters and anecdotes for my biography someday. I want to say here that it all really started to unravel at the start of my junior year when my mom made me stop wearing suits to school every day. Maybe that's just a bit of confirmation bias. But I tried to tell my mom that if anything, my backpack with wheels was probably the issue, socially speaking. If anything, the suits were the one thing that people liked about me. They were my whole thing. Not that I did it to have a thing. I just think that people should dress up and make themselves look nice to go out in public. Dress for the job you want, right? So I just started wearing khakis and rolling up the sleeves on my blue dress shirt like a guy running for president. And that was fine. It was more comfortable, I'll admit. Last summer, I took a couple of business courses at the community college in order to get a head start on my credits. For a while, I thought I was going to be the first president with an MBA, but I mentioned it around my dad once, and he told me that W also had an MBA. This summer, I was supposed to go on a big backpacking trip with Mike, Shane, and Austin. But I ended up working at Bigfoot Adventure instead. Those guys got into Harvard, Yale, and Brown, respectively. So I thought it better to let them have some time to celebrate together. At the end of June, a few weeks after school let out, I drove myself all the way to the Chicago suburbs to interview with a couple of Dartmouth alumni as part of the admission process. I stayed at my aunt's house in Naperville. The interview took place in this big brick and vine mansion out in the woods with a carriage house and a long driveway over a little creek. The 2 old ladies who interviewed me were almost cartoon characters, one short and squat with these horn-rimmed glasses like they wore in the 60s, one tall and so skinny she looked like she had to stay inside when it got too windy, wearing tiny little spectacles way down on her nose and looking up from her clipboard at me over them now and again. Very mannered, every word carefully considered, every gesture just so. And call me a midwit, but it was like a semi-groundbreaking day for me when I realized, by the way, That those cat's eyes glasses with the big points that the old ladies wear, you know, were the same frames that you see the 16-year-old girls wearing at Beatles concerts. They're not old lady glasses. They were cool then, and they just never stopped wearing them, which, in a way, I think I kind of have to respect. We sat in a shady sunroom. The floor was a black and white checkered tile. The ladies were perfectly pleasant toward me, but I was struck with the thought midway through. This woman went to Dartmouth. That means she was probably a good number of things, certainly, but cool? I mean, not that it's impossible, but once the idea had a hold of me, I couldn't shake it. What if this woman got to the nursing home or the AARP meeting and decided to totally, you know, reinvent herself? A bunch of strangers. She could say anything, have been anything, invent a personality, a past. There was a sizable chance, I'd say, that she just put those glasses on like a costume late in life when there was nobody left to call her out for her phoniness and was only playing at being the cool girl she'd always quietly wished she was. Maybe she was sitting at the lunch counter protest instead of yelling at them with her parents before going home to study. Who was going to say otherwise? Who would say that she hadn't smoked a doobie backstage with Bob Dylan? I left with the sense that they were going to have the entire room scrubbed with bleach as soon as I was gone. The following day, my aunt took me into the city to go to the museums. The day after that, my cousin came home from Iowa, where she attended university, and we went for dinner. And the day after that, I left for home via an extended detour through Springfield to visit the Lincoln Museum and Library. That was where, in the room staged to look like his funeral, I received the alarmingly short email titled agonizingly, "Your application." I could feel my face getting hot before I even started reading. There was no plan B. I hadn't even bothered applying anywhere else. It made no sense, at least at the time. I had lofty ambitions that I'd need to move in lofty circles to achieve. I needed to meet Ivy people, network with the people whose parents made decisions and moved the money and controlled the world. What use did I have for liberal arts? Or the state school people, except that one day I'd need them to vote for me. I wandered around the museum in a daze. I suddenly felt every last mile of empty space between me and my house and bed and family. All of the dioramas and display cases that had been so interesting and meaningful 5 minutes earlier were suddenly distant and pointless, if not outwardly hostile. A part of me thought that if I could just make it back home and open the email on my computer there in my bedroom, Then it would contain a completely different message, the correct message. It felt like a trapdoor had been pulled on me, and suddenly the world that I used to live in was gone. It had only ever been an elaborate movie set that I'd spent my whole conscious life constructing. The future had all made so much sense, had fit together so neatly. I'd been so sure that I was going to get in, that I'd had to tell myself aloud in my bedroom at night that there was a chance I might not, to try to force myself to confront and wrap my hands around that reality, to make it real enough to be something that I could will myself to believe, just so that the satisfaction would be even greater when I was inevitably accepted. I ended up back near the beginning in the replica of the general store Abe had co-owned. I was being pummeled by an avalanche of novel angles and considerations to this new reality, each one seemingly more dire than the one that preceded it. Oh God, what would I tell the guys, my family, my teachers, everyone at school? God, I had been insufferable. I had walked around that place like I already was the president. I knew they loathed me, but I could shrug it all off, knowing that one day they'd see the error of their ways when I arrived where I was headed and was proven to have been right all along. Dear God, I couldn't go back. How could I show my face? Since the 8th grade, I'd been mentally congratulating myself for my internal magnanimity, that I didn't really consider the kids going to Ohio State to be inferior or less intelligent, or so I insisted to myself. I looked into the wax eyes of the young Abe behind the counter of his failing store. They were warm and kind, and I could feel my heart rate coming down. Ignominious beginnings. There was more than one way to skin a cat, more than one path to the presidency. Abe taught himself to read. I didn't want to be a lawyer, though. The law was too squishy, all arguments and interpretations. I was a businessman. I liked and understood the hard and fastness of money. $1 was $1 and 5 was 5. Numbers couldn't lie. And the task was straightforward. Revenue up, costs down. Maybe Abe could have used someone like me. A bald old man in round glasses and a polo shirt came in to tell me that the museum was closing. The sun was already setting when I left Springfield. It was dark by the time I reached Indiana, and I somehow got turned around and then got lost, trying to find my way back to the main highway. I ended up on some real dark rural 2-lane roads, and even one dirt road for a few minutes, that kept getting narrower and narrower. I looked up a hotel, but it was almost an hour away, and when I arrived, I found not only the hotel, but the entire small town around it dark and apparently long abandoned. I kept driving. There was nothing but farms and wind turbines, no matter how far I drove. The headlights occasionally coming in the opposite direction were the only life I saw anywhere. I still flinched a little when they passed, so close, so fast. All it would take is a little twitch of the muscles, a sneeze even, one of us dropping our drink to turn the wheel 10 degrees. When I drove past the sign for Bigfoot Adventure, it was the first light I'd seen besides the clock on the dash for at least 10 miles. 1 in every 8 campers report a sighting. It was wrapped in a string of white Christmas lights, the big fat kind. And the neon no in front of the vacancy was dark. I didn't have a tent or even a sleeping bag, but I didn't really have any other option. It actually said Bigfoot A Venture. I don't know where the D went. Someone told me tornado once, but I think they were joking. The car slowing and the gravel popping beneath my tires snapped me out of my road trance. The world came at me in all its immediacy. The closeness of the trees, the loudness of the bugs. The inside of the car no longer constituted its own self-contained little world, and it was like someone just hit the off button on the remote mid-sentence on my daydream. I was really out here, in the middle of nowhere. The magnitude of my loneliness sank to the bottom of my stomach like a boulder in a pond. The branches scratched at the mirrors and doors. The car rocked and jostled. The campgrounds at the end of the road were dark, of course, and I half expected to find them abandoned as well, but to my surprise, there was someone up and on duty in the office. I explained my situation to the guy, and he just gave me the key to the bathroom and told me I could sleep in the parking lot. I thought I'd be lucky if I even managed an hour of sleep in the back seat, but I was snoring within 10 minutes of lying down. The birds were chirping when I woke up. The sun was still orange and shining low through the trees, and the windows were all fogged up. I could hear voices outside. When I went into the office to return the bathroom key, the old man from the night before was gone, and when I saw the girl who'd replaced him behind the desk, I hesitated and nearly walked right back out. My hair looked like shit. I hadn't showered. I could smell my own breath. But she'd already seen me. "How was your night?" she asked, smiling. "Not the best," I said. What was I doing? I was supposed to put the key on the counter and drive back to Ohio. I was barely awake, and my mouth was running off all on its own, like a rogue lawnmower, telling her all about Dartmouth, the backpacking trip. I could feel my eyes starting to water the longer I talked. I had to focus to keep my voice from trembling. She pouted her lips and looked at me sympathetically. "Did you see any Bigfoots at least? We've had reports of a whole family in the area." "No," I said. "No Bigfoots." "I'm sorry to hear that," she said. "Would you like to stay one more night for 25% off? Your odds increase the longer you stay." I told her thanks, but no, I had to get going. I noticed that the t-shirts and hats and mugs arranged behind the counter all said Bigfoot A Venture. "What are you going to do when you get back?" she asked. I shrugged. "My parents will probably make me get a job." "That sucks," she said. "Want to work here?" "Here?" I repeated. "Sure. All things considered, it's not a bad summer job. We like to have a good time. She smiled and winked at me. She was using a red pen to keep her hair in a bun. It looked like she chewed on the butt end. I asked if she had ever seen Bigfoot. Oh, yeah, she said. Several times. If you work here, you'll almost definitely meet him at some point. I didn't know what exactly she meant. Like, shake his hand? I said that it sounded fun, but I lived pretty far away. So do I, she said. There's a bunch of us. Mr. Beavis has got us some cabins and trailers we stay in for the summer. The more real it became, the more compelled I felt to extricate myself. She was the type of girl that leaves you almost relieved for a moment when you leave the room, because it's kind of hard to breathe while you're talking to her. But then you spend the next several hours or weeks thinking about the conversation in every down moment, and everything you said, and everything she said, and what you could have said better, worrying how she interpreted this, what that eyebrow raise meant, and kicking yourself because you know you could have extended it even just a minute or two longer. Your joke could have been a little funnier, and who knows what might have happened in those extra few minutes. The most courageous thing I have done in months, maybe ever, was to stick my head back in the door after I had left and tell her my name. I'm Shauna, by the way, she said, mimicking me. The sun was a bit higher in the sky, and a mother duck was leading her ducklings across the parking lot, which suddenly seemed like the most beautiful place on the planet. There was a cloud of helicopter leaves floating to the earth and catching the sunlight, a wisp of mist between the trees, a little creek running quietly behind the main office. I thought about her on the drive home. I thought of the two cartoonish old ladies in their castle, of Mike, Shane, and Austin, of my parents. I thought about what she said about the job. I thought about working some similar paying job back at home, about caddying for my dad's boss's friends at the country club after I'd told them all I was going to go to Dartmouth and going to be the president. I thought of wearing an apron and bussing the tables of kids from school. I thought about Shauna, the birthmarks on her neck. I tried to think about the future, even about the first thing I'd do when I returned home. Probably pee, I'd guess, but then I'd have to see my parents at the front door. And who knew how much I'd have to explain just to get to the bathroom? That made my chest feel tight. I thought of Teddy Roosevelt, one of my all-time favorites, and his Rough Riders, his world-renowned acumen as an outdoorsman. A summer in the woods. A summer with Shauna. I turned the car around. She smiled when she saw me walk in the office. A big, gleaming black pickup truck turned into the parking lot right on my heels. Perfect, said Shauna. There's my boss. A big guy jumped down out of the driver's seat with his t-shirt tucked into his jeans. He had a goatee of facial hair to denote where his chin was because there was no discernible break where his neck ended and his jaw and cheeks began, and his sunglasses were clamped in place between his forehead and his cheeks, the arms bending to accommodate his skull. Those plastic hinges must have been screaming. He came stomping into the office, massive coffee in one hand, hiking up his jeans with the other. The little bell rang. I mean, his thermos was seriously the size of a mortar shell, even next to him, and he was no small man. He set it on the counter, and it was about as big as Shauna's torso. His cowboy boots were warped and creased within an inch of their life. "What's shaking, baby?" he said. "All good," said Shauna. "Found us some help for the summer." He took off his sunglasses and looked me up and down. His eyes were like little olives at constant risk of being lost in the dough of his face. "You crazy?" he said. "No." "Violent?" "No." "Good with kids?" I shrugged. "Pretty good." He was good at Harvard, but he had a change of heart. I was about to correct her when I realized that she was joking. "Yeah, well, he'll get a better practical education here anyway." I don't think he was. "You good with your hands? You know your way around a wrench?" "Enough. I can learn." "You afraid of getting wet? Hot? Cold? Dry?" "No." "Mud? Bugs?" "No, no." "What about drugs? You do drugs?" No." "Well, why the hell not?" He cracked a big smile and smacked the counter loud enough to make me jump. He nudged my arm. "Nah, I'm just kidding. You kids are too young for all that." Wink. He started clomping back to his office. "Welcome to Bigfoot Adventure, son. We could use a little more muscle around here. You'll show 'em around?" Shauna nodded. I followed her first to the boathouse, where they rented kayaks and canoes for use on the lake. There was an overgrown archery range. "It was long abandoned when I started," she said. "Mr. Beavis talks about turning it into a putt-putt place. This all used to be a Boy Scout camp." I said that putt-putt would be cool. "I told him it would ruin the atmosphere," she said. "Yeah," I said, "it would." She side-eyed me and burst out laughing. "What?" I said. "Both can be true." "You should be a politician," she said. I told her that I planned to become president. I waited for her to laugh. She didn't. There was a kitchen cabin where they sold hot dogs and popcorn through a window. She pointed down a gravel road to where some trailers were circled. "That's where we stay," she said. "We'll get you situated over there in a minute, but first, I want to show you something." She led me to an unmarked trail into the woods. If she hadn't been there, I probably never would have clocked it. We walked in single file for a few minutes, not talking, just listening to the sounds of the dead leaves swishing around our feet. I only stopped because she stopped in front of me. I didn't even notice the little shack at first. The old boards were covered in moss and the windows were dingy past the point of being reflective and possibly past the point of transparency altogether. "This right here is the beating heart of the whole operation," she said. "And you can never, ever, ever tell another living soul about it who isn't an employee of Bigfoot Adventure Campground, LLC. Not your parents, not your best friend, not your wife." "I don't have a wife," I said. "Hold up your right hand," she said. I complied. "Shit. Do you have a Bible?" I shook my head. "Doesn't matter. Just repeat after me. I, your name, swear to always uphold the interests of Bigfoot Adventure." I repeated. "I vow to embody the Bigfoot Adventure lifestyle, both in and out of work, for I am a representative of the campground wherever I go, all over the world." Again. "I will strive to better myself by asking, before every action I take, will this make the company a better place than it was before I took this action?" I repeated, mostly. "Congratulations," she said. "You're hired." She took a key off the ring on her belt and unlocked the shack door. "If any civilian finds this, and it's because of you, you're fired. No questions asked." And depending on the circumstances, you might be lucky if that's all that happens. Not to scare you or nothing. I said, like, she said, let's just say he's got expensive lawyers and donates to all the judges when they're up for re-election. The old timers, when I started here, had some stories, but you never know what's them fucking with you and what's real, you know? She opened the door. A whole family of big feet were hanging on hooks along the long wall. Mr. Beavis had a different contractor build this shed than the one who did all the rest of the renovations. Paid them through a shell corporation and everything. It's not on any maps, even the official ones. Wait, I said. We're the big feet? You're not, she said. Not yet. You're not ready. Not even close. Okay, I said. Right, but like, there's no real Bigfoot? She shrugged. How should I know? That was when some tall, swoopy-haired brunette guy came crunching down the trail, with acne on his chin. Sup, Shauna? Derek! She slugged him on the arm as he passed. You friends with Foot for the lunch show? He stood in the doorway and brushed the hair out of his eyes and looked at me. Who's this? New guy, she said. Mind if we shadow you? Not while I change, he said with a cocky smile. Pfft, as if, she said, and I didn't care for the way she smiled at him, but that's neither here nor there. The seams in the suit were visible from up close if you knew you were looking at a suit, but honestly, the thing was way more convincing than I'd taken it for, hanging on the wall. He fist-bumped Shauna, and he was off. We followed from a few hundred feet back. We crossed a small footbridge over a little creek that was barely more than wet mud, and skirted an open field of tall grass, and on the other side there was a pond full of bulrushes, and on the other side of that there was a metal pole in the ground with chains hanging from it like an industrial maypole. It was the first man-made thing we'd seen in a while. So this is what I'll be doing? I said. Shauna scoffed. I'd expect to wait at least 2 seasons before they even think about letting me be friends with Bigfoot. Derek stopped and craned his neck, then signaled for us to stop where we were. We ducked down behind a low sand berm near a little strip of pond beach, and almost right away I heard the voices approaching. Derek was nestled behind a wide tree, stretching. Something caught my eye, moving between the trees. It was a yellow frisbee. It hit the trunk of an ash tree and turned over and crashed and rolled back in a half-moon the way it had come before falling on its face. Laughter. The voices came nearer. I saw Derek watching them. It seemed like he might have a better view of them than we did. It sounded like 3 teenage boys. Under her breath, I heard Shauna say, Wolf. I said, what? She said, I'm glad Derek's out there. Teen boys can be rough. The only thing that would be worse is if they had a girl with them they were trying to impress. I cracked a piece of gum from its foil packaging and popped it in my mouth. Shauna looked at me. You don't share? She said. She had this kind of half-cocked little grin. I don't know. I can't describe what happened to me when she looked at me like that. It was like I lost control of the muscles in my face. She spat it out almost immediately and started spitting and wiping her tongue on her sleeve. She grabbed the package. This is nicotine gum. I took it back. Really? You smoke? She said. I shook my head. I saw Mark Washburn chewing it on Hot on the Trail. Have you seen that? It's a political documentary. It sounds boring, but it's actually good. He was Seth Longwell's campaign manager. She shushed me. The boys appeared over a rise to our right, in a grassy clearing that I guess constituted the fairway. They were talking and laughing, maybe 80 yards away. I popped one more piece of gum. Then I heard leaves rustling to our left. Derek was going for it. His gait was perfect. You know the one. Arms swinging, knuckles forward. It was like seeing the film strip brought to life. I didn't care for the way that Shauna was looking at him. It took the Frolfers a second to notice him, but we heard it when they did. Dude! Dude! Oh shit! They stood completely still, watching Derek's progress. He gave one casual, carefree look back over his shoulder at them, never broke stride. And then, all of a sudden, one of them was running. It didn't feel real. And then they were all running, right for him. Shit, said Shauna. She fumbled with the radio on her hip. Chasers on the Frolf back 9. Chasers Frolf back 9. Derek took off running. We gave chase to all 4, but we stood as little chance as Derek did. When we found them a minute later, they had pinned him to the ground and were taking turns kicking him. The Bigfoot head had rolled downhill and landed in a muddy depression. Shauna marched right at them and hit them with a hearty gust of pepper spray. They cried out and tried to shield their faces. One ran off into the woods, wailing and wiping at his eyes. The other 2 collapsed next to Derek. Security showed up a few minutes later, riding a gator with a spinning red light on top. They cuffed the 2 boys and took Derek to the medical cabin. The 3rd boy they tracked down an hour later at his parents' cabin. They were all made to sign non-disclosure agreements in exchange for the camp not pressing charges, and then banned from the property for life. When it was over and they were gone, I sat with Shauna in the rocking chairs on the office porch. She had a different look in her eyes, distant. She shook her head. That stupid boy, she said. She put her face in her hands. He's such a show-off. I hate him. I asked what she meant. He knew he shouldn't have gone for that. It was so stupid. You never have to make a pass. Do you hear me? I looked up and realized that she was looking right at me. Her eyes were no longer distant. I mean it. Never. You can abort any time you get a bad feeling. Mr. Beavis will never fault you for that. It's in our contract. Your safety is the only thing that matters. 3 athletic, older kids egging each other on, no parents in sight, that far out from any help, and in broad daylight? If you ever do something so stupid and get yourself hurt like that, I'll kill you. You hear me? I nodded. She looked off the other way in a minor huff and kept her neck turned 180 degrees like that for a minute. I think she was crying. I heard crunching gravel, and then another kid about our age, in an oversized red Bigfoot A Venture polo, came around the corner of the office and around to the front of the porch and put one foot on the one step up, one hand on the balustrade. He had a small, dark shrub of tightly curled hair on his head. Hey, Shauna. She sniffled and turned in the chair to look at him. What's up, Jake? I'm supposed to go clean up at the scene and collect any evidence that's left. Can you show me where it happened? I think it was the 15th hole or the 16th. Here, Bo can go with you. He looked at me then for the first time. He nodded to say, "Let's go." I looked at Shauna, but she was already back to looking the other way, so I followed him. He had a blue bandana hanging out of the back pocket of his jeans, which were massive and sagged beneath his butt so that I could see the tartan pattern on his boxers. "What's going on, Bo? Is that like B.O.?" "The other one," I said. "Actually," I said, "when I was 13, I tried going by B.E.A.U.X., but they just kept calling me B.O. in body odor anyways." I couldn't believe what I was revealing. The part of me that lived inside of my head, and for no reason, just to cover a moment of awkwardness. Usually my mind moved in lockstep with the things that came out of my mouth, but it was like I'd been divided in two. Why was I talking like this to this perfect stranger? "Damn," he said. "That's bogus, man. I'm sorry as fuck to hear that, dog." And I don't know what it was, but I felt like he really meant it. "I'll call you the other one," he said. "Thanks," I said. The Frisbee golf course actually looked pretty official from the front. "So are you a Zeppelin guy or a Floyd guy?" he said. I was confused. I said that I'd been listening to one of my dad's Beatles cassettes in the car, since it didn't have a CD player. He shook his head. "Beatles are baby music," he said. "No offense. I mean, they're fine. I just mean everyone likes them. They're like the first thing they play for you when you're learning to clap. I'm talking about, like, when you're figuring out what pussy is." I said, "Oh," like I understood. He said, "I have a buddy who has a theory that there's basically two types of guys in the world, and it breaks down to if you liked Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd first when you were in high school." I thought about it and said, "I like Electric Light Orchestra." He said, "That's Pink Floyd." He never said what that meant. We'd taken a shortcut, and I pointed out the basket near where they'd tackled him. We started scanning the ground along the route they'd chased him. "What are you doing for PI?" he asked. I said, "Huh?" He said, "Passive income, dog. Stocks and shit." I told him that I had a share of Microsoft stock my grandma bought me for my birthday when I was 7 because I liked playing on the computer. He smacked his lips and shook his head. "I gotta teach you about investing." "I know about investing," I said. "I took the entrepreneurship class at my school, and the business class over the summer at the community college for college credit. I just thought you had to be 18 to open a trading account." "Well, shit. It's not just stocks in the S&P or whatever. The world is full of places to make money if you've got a little to put down and a little bit of time before you need it back. I mean, shit. When I got my bar mitzvah money, I put some of that in a restaurant my mom's friend was starting. There's a couple of vape shops back in town I've got a stake in. I even put a little in my homie's weed business." I told him that sounded great. "I mean, at this point, I pretty much only do this shit to get out of the house and meet the honeys who come through here, you know what I'm saying?" He told me that Mr. Beavis made the money to buy the land for Bigfoot Adventure, selling a sort of boutique big mouth Billy Bass singing fish, except his were made with real taxidermy smallmouth that he caught in a lake a town over from where he lived, using fraudulent licenses and some basic disguises to pretty much genocide the bass population over the course of about a month. Eventually, DNR caught him, and he couldn't pay the fine, so he did 6 months in county while some poor women in Hong Kong were busy breaking hundreds of little jaws to install the motors to make them sing the Beach Boys. The fish all shipped with faulty voice boxes that failed after 6 months and turned them into wall-mounted demons. He had to start using rubber fish after that, and he's never forgiven the Chinese for it. said Jake. Look in his office next time you're in there. He has one hanging up with an American flag painted over it and a black and white picture of his dead dad in the middle. It's right next to the Rotary Club award. Derek was taking some time off, so they put me in his trailer. We all ate dinner together at the mess hall, and everyone kept talking about the 4th coming up. I kept trying to get Shauna's attention, but it seemed like I was no longer her project. And I spent a long night quietly crying in my trailer, wondering what the hell I was doing at a Bigfoot campground in the middle of Indiana. Campers were already trickling in the next morning with fireworks and flag bathing suits. Mr. B put me on the first shift at the front gate to get my feet wet. That's the secret to a trial by fire. Did you know that? Those guys that can walk across the coals? Wet feet. Just like you lick your fingers to put out a birthday candle. He winked. I never did that with the birthday candles. I always thought that the kids who did or could were psychos, even if I was kind of envious. People were pretty friendly, and once I had the hang of the register, pretty soon I mostly forgot all about the gnawing loneliness that had consumed me 12 hours earlier. I ended up near Shauna at lunch. Pure luck, with a little bit of proper timing on my part. I think, with everyone constantly vying for her attention, she just sort of tended to give it to whoever was closest to her. Once I realized that she was making everyone feel the way she made me feel, her effect sort of diminished, in theory. In reality, when she looked at me or laughed at something I said, I mean, I don't know. What can you say? After lunch, Mr. B moved me into the gift shop and the air conditioning, which I appreciated. I was supposed to ask everyone who came in, spotted any squatches today? Which I didn't care for so much. Shauna didn't say it to me, and come to think of it, neither did whoever was on duty when I arrived on the first night. But Mr. B's office was right in the other room, and the first time I tried to get a little cute with it and just said, "Hey, what's up? Welcome to Bigfoot Adventure." He came out as soon as the customers were gone and asked me what the hell that was. I'd sort of forgotten about my little toe-in-the-water rebellion while I processed the rest of the transaction and tried to remember how the register worked, so I was genuinely confused for a second. "How exactly do you think employment works?" he asked. I said, "Huh?" And he threw it right back at me with a sneer that caught me off guard. "I am paying you, which means when I tell you to do something, you do it exactly how and when I tell you to do it." I apologized, and he closed his office door again. I said it every time after that, even when Shauna walked in. She laughed at me, and when I told her what happened, she said that he was fucking with me. But I don't think he was. That night, I finally worked up the nerve and used the office landline to call my parents. I was glad to be several hundred miles away. I could keep taking deep breaths and reminding myself of that. It was not a good call, but I felt better when it was over. I was actually doing it. A whole school bus full of kids showed up at exactly 9 o'clock the next morning, a field trip from a nearby day camp. Apparently it was an annual thing. Everyone kind of rolled their eyes at it. Jake was scheduled for a shift in the suit. Friends with Foot, they called it. In case anyone ever overheard them, I guess. They didn't want people going around saying, "Yeah, I'm being Bigfoot today." Also, Mr. Beavis had this whole thing about the eternal squatch that we were meant to carry in our minds, that Even if nobody was actively in the suit, the idea of him was supposed to be so powerful that it was as if there really were some man-ape out there walking around at all hours. I'm not really sure I understood the whole metaphysics of it. I sort of tuned out and tuned back in, and he was saying something about the Holy Trinity. I think like how Jesus is God and also isn't, but still is. It's also supposed to be like an ideal that we all strive for each time we inhabit the suit. And also, the best way someone else described it for me, consciousness that we can each meld with and receive from and contribute to. Actually, we are expected to. If you read some clause buried on the 55th page of our employment contracts. B has a bit of a woo-woo streak, but some of the guys who've been here a few years and take it seriously will talk about it in the same way. For the field trip crowd, Jake would walk by where all the kids were seated so they could see him and squeal and giggle. Everyone sort of treated the gig like a punishment, though I don't know what crime he was supposed to have committed. If I could be a little forward or risk overstepping a boundary with anyone at this point, it was Jake, and he didn't seem too jazzed about the assignment himself. So when we were out of earshot, I volunteered to take his place. His eyes lit up a little bit, but I was suggesting a way more serious offense than I realized. I could not, for example, go to Mr. Beavis and ask him to switch us out on the calendar. Everyone was going to still have to think that it was him underneath the fur. Fine with me. I mostly just wanted to see what it was like. Incredibly smelly, I found out. That was my first and most powerful impression of the experience. Just a real punchy in the face, gag your throat type of odor. Powerful stuff. You get used to it, he said. Kind of. Months of dried sweat beneath the sharpness of various clean, bleachy scents, and it felt like every few seconds I'd catch a whiff of some new, different, musky perfume freshener. Dry clean only, at the end of every season. Some guys will wear like a dozen old car air fresheners around their neck, but it's better to just acclimate and take a shower after. It was tougher to move my limbs than I'd anticipated. Besides, if anyone ever does get too close, God forbid, Bigfoot probably should stink, don't you think? The kids were older than I'd pictured. That put some lead in my sneakers. They all looked like 12, 13, old enough to have personalities and make jokes and laugh at me if I fucked up, or even if I did well. I said, "Do I go yet?" and looked around. The mask gave me tunnel vision. Jake was nowhere to be found. Then my stomach sank. I don't know how I could tell, but somehow I knew that one of the kids had seen me. Maybe they all got real quiet. I don't know. My subconscious must have picked up on something. A moment later, I heard one of them whisper shout, "There he is!" And there was giggling and gasping. My face felt suddenly very hot, and my heart was pounding like mad. I tried to remember 15 things at once, and they all got stuck trying to push past each other into my brain. How had Derek done it? What were the rules Shauna talked about? The code of ethics posted on the dressing room wall. Didn't Jake mention something about which way my palms should face? Thumbs to nipple height, no higher. Everyone thinks they need to do these big exaggerated swings, and they get so carried away. I just started walking, swinging my arms. Make it you, but play the character. I could feel the kids' awe, hear the thrill in the murmurs that were running up and down their line. One of them said, "Oh my God, it's Willie Him." And this idea came to me that I would look at them and then, just like my dog does when he's confused, just sort of tilt my head to the side. They loved it. Gales of laughter. And they loved it even more a second later when my foot hit a rock and I stumbled and almost fell right on my face. Laughter twice as hard. Uproarious laughter. Howling laughter. I glanced over, and even some of the chaperones were straight up losing their minds with laughter. Like, get a grip. I noticed one little blonde girl near the far end who wasn't laughing. She just kept staring at me with this barely concealed terror in her eyes. I don't know how I felt it, just a natural instinct maybe, but some part of me knew, without being able to articulate it in the moment, that I could use her. If I could provoke a genuine reaction out of her, real fear, it would whip the rest of them back into line at once, metaphorically, since they were still mostly sitting in their assigned spots. I threw my hands in the air like a monster and charged through the trees right at her, screaming and wailing, letting my voice do whatever it wanted. Even some of the adults who were seated near her stood up to run away. The poor blonde girl just started crying. I wouldn't be surprised if she peed her pants. I'll never forget that look she had in her eyes as I was bearing down on her. It didn't feel great, I can tell you that. But the plan worked for what it was worth. Nobody was laughing anymore. I had no idea what to do next, so I turned and ran, which was actually part of the protocol, as my good luck would have it. So at least I followed one part. I remember Jake saying each of the suits was insured for like $5,000 or something. And also my car was still parked in the parking lot, so I would eventually have to return. But I sat in the woods for a while first, maybe half an hour, trying to wait out what I would later in life learn to call a panic attack. A week ago, I'd never even heard of this stupid place, and now it felt like my heart was beating out of rhythm because I was going to be fired. I tried to imagine negotiating some brink of nuclear war situation from the Oval Office when I was about to pass out over a 10-year-old girl and a cabaret fishmonger. I wondered if Teddy Roosevelt ever imagined himself as president as a 17-year-old. It didn't seem like something a president would do, to be honest. Maybe Nixon. Definitely Nixon. In the biographies, the rest always seem to bull rush life, totally unaware that such an office even exists, too busy collecting anecdotes that attest to their raw charisma, grabbing some other aspect of life by the throat and subduing it, until the magnitude of their greatness cannot be contained by anything but the presidency, and history is thrust upon them. They didn't spend days mapping out their freshman course load in preparation. But what could I do? Stop being self-aware? I realized, sitting in the woods, the mistake that I was maybe subconsciously trying to correct for in taking this job in the first place. I could manufacture good grades, but I'd put no effort into manufacturing a story to tell. President wasn't a job that you studied for, or if you did, that wasn't the story that you told, even though in any rational world that's exactly how we would select presidents. The most qualified students would all go to president school, and then whoever got the best grades would become next in line. I reminded myself that I couldn't even get into Dartmouth. I needed something to talk about on the late-night circuit. Mr. Beavis didn't start yelling at me the moment I walked in the door like I'd been preparing for. He sat silently behind his desk until I came into his office and laid the suit in front of him. I tried to say that I was sorry and had to clear my throat and make a second attempt. He asked if I could give him a reason not to fire me. I thought about it and said that I had showed initiative. He seemed to genuinely consider it. and said that it was true. I did. Just answer me this, he said. What on God's green earth was going through your head? Nothing, I answered without thinking. I was just acting like I thought Bigfoot would act. He stared at me with his mouth slightly agape. I began to suspect that, with their busiest weekend of the year a day away, he wasn't looking to lose any more hands. I was right. I think you should stay close by for a while, he said, where I can keep an eye on you. Take out the trash, stuff like that. The next day, from the time I showed up in the morning till dinner, I was probably never more than 50 feet from Mr. B. I spent the afternoon alphabetizing one of his filing cabinets. We talked, and I told him about the interview, but not about the rejection. I mentioned the summer business classes, and he seemed impressed. He really perked up when I started talking about the MBA. Yeah, that's interesting stuff, he said. Now that I think about it, I am not entirely sure what exactly he did all day on a normal day, considering he spent most of that morning shooting the shit with me and the rest of the time playing some strategy game on the computer, building a castle. Once, out of nowhere, he burst into laughter. I can't believe you made that poor girl shit her fucking pants, he sputtered. I mean... He tried to continue, but he was laughing too hard. It took him a minute or two. I don't know what's wrong with you, but I think I might like it. You said the Ivy League? I nodded. You ever heard of something called Street Smart versus Book Smart? He said. I nodded again, and he just chuckled. I asked him which one he was, and he said, both. Shauna and a girl named Murph worked the front gate the next day. They were inspecting cars for fireworks and accepting tips to look the other way. It was a time-honored tradition for many of the campsites to join in once Mr. Beavis's show was clearly in its grand finale phase, and to keep it going after, like a gunpowder applause, a Roman candle salute. And from there would be stuff popping off pretty consistently till 3 or 4 in the morning, and sporadically after that for the rest of the weekend. Jake told me that one year someone started letting off their own munitions 15 minutes into the house show during a quieter section where B was clearly trying to draw back a bit to draw the audience in before he walloped them with some really big swings in the second act. Jake said that Mr. Beavis stopped what he was doing, kicked over the next rocket, and just walked off, right in the middle of the show. You might be thinking now, why exactly was I still languishing in Indiana? And to tell you the truth, as I was dusting his 3rd and 4th place men's league softball trophies, I also sometimes slipped into this sort of thinking. But then, the day before the 4th, I finally witnessed what you might call, colloquially, a successful run. There are many and varied slang terms for it which the employees like to employ. I'll try to impart the feeling of being in the camp when it happened, but you really have to experience it for yourself. It was not quite sunset, but it was finally starting to cool down. I was doing inventory on the Bigfoot Venture Bigfoot Butt Cheek beer koozies when I saw someone run by the window out of the corner of my eye. I went over to investigate and saw everyone outside kind of dropping what they were doing and going on their tippy toes trying to see something in the woods to the north by the first group site. I went out to look for myself, and people were, I'm telling you, skipping. Little kids were like clapping furiously just because they had so much excitement and didn't know what else to do with it. People were positively giddy. I only saw a flash of brown between two beech trees, and it gave me goosebumps. And I knew that it was just Mackenzie. The electricity didn't dissipate for at least a half an hour. Everyone was eager to tell everyone else what had happened, even though, for the most part, everyone had been there, so that the few folks who hadn't seen it, because they were out getting beer or taking a dump or whatever, became, at least for a little while, the most popular people in the camp. Everyone had to tell how they had seen it, and everyone was happy to listen, even if it was just so that they could take their turn next to report how it had gone down for them. I saw how it was all supposed to work. I saw the magic. And it's the funniest thing, but I was walking back to my trailer to grab something, getting near dusk, kind of dark in the woods, and all of a sudden a deep chill ran down my back and made my whole body cold, the hair on my neck stand on end. I turned around and scanned the woods. I didn't see anything, but for the rest of the night, or at least until I was back where the other people were, it was really hard to shake the feeling that I was being watched. We were all waiting for Mackenzie at the employee campground when she got back, and there was an impromptu party. They generally wanted you to walk into the woods 20 minutes or so after a big run like that, just in case any kids or wannabe paparazzi were following you. Over the next few days, individuals or small groups coming back from hikes or fishing or sometimes just going off somewhere to take a leak reported a number of sightings several times when we didn't even have anyone in a suit. Has anyone ever seen, like, an actual Bigfoot? I said aloud, directly as the thought occurred to me before I could hear how it sounded in my head. I was washing dishes with Shauna after dinner. She let out half of a laugh before she could contain it, and had to contort her face to do so. She set her chin and blinked like she was still fighting it and said, "Anything's possible, right?" The light was still on beneath Mr. Beavis's door when I finished for the night, so I knocked before heading back to my cabin. He said, "Come in," but then seemed a little surprised when it was me, maybe even a little disappointed. "I just wanted to run an idea by you, if that's all right." His eyes narrowed. "Okay, so tomorrow is going to be a busy day, right?" He nodded and yawned and checked his watch. "What if you offer to upcharge everyone who rents a campsite by, I don't know, $5, and in exchange, they get a subscription, or a season pass, you could call it. Come anytime they want." He picked up the last bite of his turkey sandwich and turned it around in his fingers, mostly crust. "It's not much more for them, but they're getting so much more for it, and it'll add up for us." He said, "We don't do season passes. If nobody makes reservations, then how do I know how many people are going to show up and if I got enough space for them?" I said, 98% of them will never come back. They won't reorient the rest of their summer vacation plans around $5. But when they're excited to get to the party, they'll think, "Oh, maybe in August I could get that Friday off and come back for a long weekend. For $5, what the hell?" It's like how when you go to a restaurant hungry, you wish you could order everything on the menu. He put the bread back without eating any and stroked his chin. "But if they do come back, now I'm just putting them up for free." I thought about it and said, "Get them on the concessions. You can't get any of their money if they're not around, right? That's called a loss leader." He thought about it and rubbed his temples and sighed and said, "Yeah, what the hell? They sold like gangbusters, like hotcakes. I don't know what gangbusters are. Hotcakes, was there ever really a time? Or is that just a clever sleight of hand from the hotcake marketing department? Maybe even people in the old days were like, when the hell did people like hotcakes so damn much? A little self congratulatory from Hotcakes Corporate, though, don't you think? Sort of giving themselves their own performance review with that one, aren't they? But that's everyone these days, I suppose. They start off by telling you how great they are, and the reason for their greatness is because they're great. Haven't you heard? Everyone thinks our products sell like crazy because the one thing they know about our product is how well it sells. But who is buying? I tried a moon pie once and it tasted like depression food. The 4th was sunny and hot. Shauna was on the phone with someone for a long time in the morning and was in a pretty sour state after that, but everyone else was in a good mood. It seemed like almost every car I saw had one of the little footprint stickers on their windshield that they were using for the passes. I caught a glimpse of B while I was helping a group of college kids get settled into their spot. He looked very happy. He was walking around with a speaker clipped to his belt, playing Springsteen, walking from site to site, shaking people's hands and making small talk like the owner of a fancy restaurant. It felt like the sunset took 5 hours. Nobody was friends with Foot tonight. There would be nothing to distract from the artillery exhibition. People didn't even try to hide their illicit fireworks from me when I would come by to check on them. A few groups even offered me beer. As soon as it was dark, Mr. B began his performance. The cheers and whistling came from every corner of the camp. I noticed Shauna sitting on a picnic table apart from everyone else. Even in the dark, I could tell that she had been crying. I tried to play it cool, though. At school, whenever I liked a girl, if I ever got past just staring at her in the hall, I almost always fell into a trap where I just ended up following her around, trying to make her feel better about herself whenever other people made her feel bad. I wasn't dumb. I could usually gauge pretty quickly that she was just tolerating me, that she certainly wasn't going home and thinking about me all night and coming back in the morning with a knot in her stomach over whether or not I'd be at my locker when she walked past. But for a few weeks, months, it didn't matter. I mean, it did. It killed me inside. It made me feel like I was living in an angsty music video from the time I woke up till the time I went to sleep. But for a long time, I would just be so happy to be around her that I'd tell myself the rest didn't matter. It could come later. If I could just hang around her long enough, I could convince her to like me. I didn't lay awake in bed fantasizing about a girl I'd worn down into begrudgingly liking me. But the precious few over the years who liked me the way I wanted to be liked were never the ones I wanted to like me. So I didn't ask her what was wrong or anything like that. I pretended not to even notice. And the crazy part is that I could literally almost feel the power dynamic shift, like in my stomach, when she tried to suddenly wipe away a tear and put on a straight face. It was kind of thrilling, but I wasn't sure I liked the feeling. I wanted to ask her if she was all right. Tell her whatever it was going to be all right, but I didn't. I made a joke about Mr. B's fireworks and Donald Rumsfeld in Iraq, but I don't think she got it. All of a sudden, something was moving in the dark. It was waist height, like a coyote or a big cat, but it was a little kid. "Excuse me," she said. "Do you work here? I just saw a Bigfoot." Shauna sat up. It could have been a deer, sweetheart. Bigfoots don't like fireworks. I'm sure they're very far away right now. No, said the girl. I saw him. I promise you didn't, said Shauna. Where was he? I asked. By the big tree, she said. I looked at Shauna and she rolled her eyes but couldn't keep herself from cracking a small smile. To tell you the truth, I don't know where the confidence came from. I felt for a second like a guy wearing a Letterman jacket on a TV show. Or maybe I was pretending to be one. If Shauna would have pushed back in the slightest, I mean, even a side-eyed glance would have done it, I'd have crumbled, started backtracking instantly. What are you talking about, kid? Everyone knows Sasquatches are allergic to sulfur. Get lost, dumb fuck. These summer camps, they do crazy things to people. I asked her if she had her flashlight. She did. I looked at the little girl. If I give you mine, can you show us where you saw him? The girl nodded. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Shauna smiling at me. The girl took us over by the racks of rental canoes and then looked around and said, Rats. He's gone. I said, Should we check the lake? Maybe he was getting a boat. She shook her head and sighed. Bigfoot doesn't know how to row a boat. I nodded. Ah. How smart does a Bigfoot have to be before he just starts being a big hairy guy who lives in the woods, you know? She seemed to really think about it. Maybe they're already smarter than us. I asked, What gives you that idea? She thought about it again and said, I don't know. They've managed to avoid us this long, haven't they? Then she ran off. Before I knew what was happening, my hand was in Shauna's. She was pulling me toward the woods. Once we were there, she found a large tree and turned around, and as I was only beginning to comprehend what had already happened, she closed the space between us and kissed me, just like that. After the thousands of hours I'd already spent in my meager time on Earth, fixated maniacally on trying to somehow engineer this exact event, it had just happened, like that. My face was numb, just like that. And not with some homely girl a grade below me I had to settle for, with Shauna. And it was her idea. This was a story. This was the sort of thing that you put in a presidential biography. And then, just like that, I was already bordering on delirious. It was all I could do to keep motor function over my facial muscles, to keep kissing her. Just like that, she starts taking off my shirt, and then her own. I was probably going on about 20 minutes to half an hour in terms of sucking on her nipple when explosions started ripping off like machine gun fire, like 15 feet behind us. We'd walked almost right into a campsite without realizing it, and it was time to get the grand finale going, I guess. We both screamed and tried to cover our mouths for a split second of very wide-eyed eye contact before grabbing our shirts and booking it. I sort of thrashed awake the next morning, half terrified and tangled in my sheets. Mr. B was knocking at my trailer door. My stomach started sinking while I tried to recount every wrong thing I did the day before, but when he came inside, he was grinning ear to ear. We made more money in one day yesterday than we did all last 4th of July weekend. You're a genius. The hot fear that had switched on like a light now flipped to giddy ecstasy. I told him that I had another idea. I know it's not a ton, I said, but I have about $1,500 saved up from my confirmation, And also, my grandma gave me some in her will a couple of years ago. I want to invest it in Bigfoot Adventure. He stared at me with his mouth half open. After a second, it turned back into an even wider grin. You really do know what you're doing, MBA boy, don't you? I was still in bed. He stomped over and shook my hand and nearly lifted me out of the sheets in doing so. Welcome aboard, son. That night, he invited me to dinner in his office, and we had champagne, and he sent Jillian to pick up steaks and a bluing onion from Outback. At home, my mother would slap the bread right out of my hand if I tried to just tear it off the loaf with my teeth like some kind of starving peasant. But I watched Beavis pop the little packets of butter into his mouth rather than bother to smear them, and then he dipped the rest of the bread into the blood and juices on his plate, and it made me feel like I was in some kind of medieval court or something, supping with the king. I guess the first thing that went awry was probably the squatters, if you could even call them that. I suppose legally we couldn't. They did buy a fucking pass, after all, Mr. Beavis was fond of grumbling at me, or when I was within earshot. A few solo guys and one hippy-dippy couple with a 4-year-old boy living in their van. It was meant for normal, upstanding people to come back for another weekend in August, maybe sneak one more in September before Labor Day. Not for cheapskate vagabonds to take advantage of cheap rent and put down roots. Luckily, I found a law in the state of Indiana that said campers could be made to move along and vacate after 14 nights in any one site without leaving. B bemoaned that they still had the passes, so they would just turn around at the gate and we'd have to readmit them. And were we going to go through the trouble of sending some poor employee to evict them and make them pack up all their shit just to unpack it again an hour later and 50 feet to the left? I said that was exactly what we would do. And maybe at least one would be annoyed enough to just hit the road. And maybe once one of them had broken solidarity, the others would start to feel squeamish and get lost within a few days as well. None of them hit the road. The whole exercise only served to make B furious, standing at his office window, watching the white dreadlocks lay out their camp rug. He squeezed into his golf cart and drove over to stare them down from the road. Once it had begun, Mr. Beavis would have viewed it as an unconscionable defeat to ever back down on the ritual, no matter how pointless. So, after that, every 14 days, like clockwork, the extended stayers were marched to the gate and allowed to re-enter, returning to select a new site, looking like Hitler driving through Paris with his generals in their open-top cars. Although, frankly, as soon as the next weekend, the one following the 4th, there were some other alarm bells going off in my head. The guest count dwindled by more than half, and exactly 0 splurged for the season pass. When it fell again the weekend after that, I tried to talk to Shauna about it to see if it was, normal. But she had been acting differently toward me ever since I'd stopped being a coworker and become a partial owner. Distant, more formal. Or it could have been the nipple thing, I suppose. I tried to talk to Jake. It seemed that this level of traffic was, to my dismay, pretty par for the course this time of year. And August started off even worse. Too fucking hot, says B. Dog days, I said. What if we do a dog days weekend? A dog's weekend? Mr. Beavis shrugged. It was attempted, but amounted to little more than some flyers posted around common areas and a plastic kiddie pool by the office intended for dogs. A few campers showed up with dogs, but seemed surprised when we told them about the promotion. I woke up hot every morning, 7 a.m., and already sweating, both because the AC unit in my trailer was broken and because I would expect for a second and a half each time to open my eyes in my bedroom in Ohio before remembering that I'd invested my life savings in a failing Bigfoot campground 6 hours away. Abe Lincoln's dry goods store. That was when I had an idea. It occurred to me while I was sitting in an outhouse, and as soon as I finished, I ran right over to B's office to let him know. You know how the sign says 1 in every 8 sees Bigfoot? He was eating a cup of blueberry yogurt. There were 2 empties on his desk already. It's very quaint and like kitschy, even Americana, but we need to do more business, right? What if we introduce, boom, the Bigfoot guarantee? Every customer sees a Bigfoot, he said. Guaranteed, I said. Or their money back? I shrugged. It doesn't matter. We'll do so many runs that nobody could miss it. We've got the suits to cover it. With my luck, we'll have a blind guy show up and demand a refund. He looked at me hard and then down into his lap and then sighed. Why the fuck not? Send Linda to go buy some paint. It took a while for word to get around about the guarantee, but eventually we started seeing cars showing up with Missouri plates, Wisconsin, Iowa, Arkansas, even Pennsylvania, saying they had heard about us. We were packed. It got to where we were basically doing every run the same way I'd done for the field trip kids over the holiday. We were all but out and out advertising them for 15 minutes in advance to make sure everyone got the hint. Anyone else smell that? It smells like Bigfoot piss. I think some of the long-timers started to lose it a bit. I watched a few following behind families of deer on their hands and knees so that they could poke through palmfuls of poop for guests. Oh yeah, squatch scat, no doubt. Fresh. The employees fought us pretty hard when B decided we were just going to put up one of those signs like at SeaWorld that give you the times for the dolphin shows. They said it was demeaning. All of a sudden, everyone was waxing nostalgic about how they used to do things. But I haven't been around that long or had that many jobs, and even I know, everywhere you go, there's going to be people bemoaning about how much better things used to be. If it were up to people like that, there'd never be an inch of progress in this world. Once they got things how they liked them, they just keep doing them that way forever. That's the valuable function presidents and CEOs and MBAs play in our society that normal people don't understand. Doing the hard things other people don't want to do, making the difficult choices they don't want to make. Did these people who are coming from Montana and Nebraska, bright-eyed and excited, end up leaving bitter and resentful, saying goodbye through gritted teeth if they slowed down to do so at all? Almost to a person. But this is what I'm talking about. Doing the things that other people don't have the stomach for. They're from fucking Montana, for Christ's sake. They weren't coming back anyways. For a few weeks, revenue saw a market uptick, then a downturn, then another slight uptick that may have been an anomaly in hindsight. Nothing that was going to fundamentally alter the way things were. I'd run my best, most dire emergency trick play, and it had gained 5 yards. It was the first week of September, and if something didn't change very quickly, I would have absolutely no good reason or excuse to stay away from home any longer. I would be forced to return and finish my senior year broke and in disgrace. It was a rainy Tuesday, or maybe it was a Wednesday night. We hadn't had a customer all day, and the only people in the camp were the squatters, who I'd come around to appreciating for their company. A truck pulled into the lot and sat there with its headlights running for like 5 minutes. Once the engine shut off, it took the guy about as long to waddle to the office door. I could hear him wheezing. He came in with his beard dripping and put his camo hat on the counter and asked to speak to my manager. I told him that I was one of the owners, and he squinted at me. I asked if he was having some sort of a problem. Mr. Beavis must have heard, because he was behind the counter standing next to me 10 seconds later. "This kid tried to tell me he owns the place," said the man, his bottom lip packed with dip. "He does," said B. "Well, part owner. He has a stake. I'm the main owner. I founded the place, anyways." "That's me." He pointed to the placard on his door. I think he had just woken up from a nap. "How can I help you?" The man shifted his eyes between us. "You fellas really got Bigfoots around here? That ain't no joke?" "That ain't no joke," said Mr. Beavis. "No, sir. No jokes around here. Serious as a heart attack." He blinked and reacted as if he'd let an off-color joke slip out in front of a minority. But the customer didn't seem to take any notice. He looked around behind him to make sure nobody else was in the office and leaned in close over the counter. "You ever let anyone hunt one?" I think we both said, "Huh?" In the past, we have not. Does the state of Indiana even sell permits for that? The man scoffed. "I was sort of hoping you'd sell me one man to man without needing to involve no other bodies or organizations or some such. I mean, it is your land after all, isn't it?" He stuttered. "I can give you $10,000 for one. I can write you a check tonight." I think B almost choked on his own spit. "Gosh, that is, I think we might have to think about it," I said. "Sure," said the man. He slid a business card across the counter. "The owner of an excavation company a few counties over. I'm local. Just give me a call any time." He smiled and returned his hat to his head, sopping, and tipped it at us and left. Back in his office, B finished the bottle of turkey he'd been nursing and cracked open a new one and poured me a glass with some water. He slid it toward me and then caught himself, paused, and said, "What the hell?" and let me drink it. He drank his glass in one go and slid down in his chair and ran his hands through what hair he had left. "I mean, it's a lot of money," I said. He chortled. "It could float us to the end of next season without a single new customer walking through that door." "Right. But it's not like... I mean, what are we even talking about? We can't kill someone, even for 20,000. He didn't look at me. "Could we just not send anyone out? Don't put anyone in the costume. Let him go out on his hunt. No harm, no foul. People don't pay 10 big ones to walk around the woods in Putnam County looking at the trees grow. He poured himself another. I tried to time my sips so that he wouldn't see the faces I couldn't help but make. I put everything into this business, he said. I can't lose it. I said, who said anything about losing it? He shook his head. Those fireworks are all on credit. I can usually string it together one way or another to at least make the minimum payments, but the cocksuckers raised the property taxes this year of all years, and we had a slow start in the spring with the flooding, and I just... He trailed off, finished his drink, poured another, took a sip, put his head in his hands, and groaned. I won't lose it. I won't. Mr. Beavis, with all due respect, you are going to lose everything if you go to prison for murdering someone. He shook his head, his chin resting on his chest, then nodded it, then sighed and somehow slouched even further down into the chair. He finished the drink and slammed the glass on the table and started a low moan that eventually evolved into him hollering incoherently for like 10 seconds straight. Why does this always happen to me? He started pacing. I have to do it. I don't have a choice, you know? What can I do? Let the business go bankrupt? I have customers relying on me. Employees, investors, vendors. What's the choice? There is no choice. The money's there. It's sitting on the counter. If I don't take it, then I'm not doing my duty to the company, and I should be fired anyways. Which is its own kind of death, its own life sentence. They say 80% of people die within 8 months of retiring or their spouse dying, right? And this job is like a kind of like both. It's like a spouse to me and so it's not even a choice, is it? I have to have honor. If I'm going down, the least a man could do is to go down with dignity and do what he said he'd do, and that's to make this place a profitable venture. I finished my own drink right as a great roll of thunder hit. Mr. Beavis, it's late. I don't think you're thinking straight. Why don't we sleep on it and reconvene in the morning? Even if you get fired or lose the business, it's not the end of the world. Abe Lincoln had a failed business, and look what he did, right? It's better to start over than spend the rest of your life in a cell. I mean, who says those are the options? He said. That's what you don't get yet. That's what you don't get yet. You're smart, but it's all book learning, and it shows. They say you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? But that's what business is all about, you see? That's what the real ones understand. Having your cake and eating it too. You make the money coming, and you make the money going. The rules are for the regular people. Letting other people follow the rules is how you get to make the money. And the whole point of the game is to make the money. You make the money and you win. They don't stay mad at winners. I thought about pouring myself another, but thought better of it. You told me yourself that you view all of these employees like your own kids. You can't kill them. The look on his face was like he was a balloon soaring off into the sky, and I'd punctured him. Like he was fighting against himself, trying to find some other line of argument to prop up with his bluster. But the bluster was gone, and the argument was nowhere to be found. Only resignation. I stood up and opened the door. I'll come back in the morning, I said. Good night. I went to bed that night, relatively assured that I had managed to talk some sense into him, at least enough to tide him over for the night. By the time my head hit the pillow, I even had half a mind that the whole thing was just a big shit test. And tomorrow he'd laugh at how concerned my face had looked when he said he was going to let the guy try to shoot one of the employees. But the next morning I woke up, peed, brushed my teeth, and got dressed, walked over to the office, and nobody was there. I found Mr. Beavis and Shauna by the garbage cans out back. She was holding a rifle, and he was wearing a bulletproof vest. They both waved and said hello when they saw me, and then she pulled back the charging handle and aimed and fired right at him. The shot impacted directly on his chest in a red explosion. He let out a noise and staggered back half a step. Jesus Christ. My blood went cold instantly. What the hell? He probably bought the vest at a thrift shop or just sewed a stack of newspapers into it or something. But I watched, and he was still standing there. In fact, he was smiling. Hardly even felt it, he said. Great, said Shauna. She lowered the barrel a few degrees and shot him once in the leg. He yowled and leapt and ran laps around the tree, laughing. He had a splotch of blue paint on his pants near the crotch. It's going to be great, he explained, taking off the vest. I was explaining to Shauna. The campers get these paintball guns, have the time of their frickin' lives for a few days, and leave with memories to last forever. And we charge a premium and rake in the dough. Sure, you can stick with the same old experience, but you think any parent is going to be able to hold out after their kid sees all the other kids with these things? I stared at him. You're not worried about the suits? It's water soluble, he said, and we'll be making enough that we can replace the suits every year if we want to. Not that we have to, I'm just saying. And they're okay with this? I said, looking at Shauna. They'll have masks, leg guards. It would take a perfect shot just to leave a bruise. Shauna shrugged. It's whatever you guys say, right? Huh. I thought it was a real gun for a second when I first walked up, I said. I stared even harder at him, and he only smiled back at me. Don't be crazy. I had to extricate after that, take a walk in the woods for a bit. The guy showed up the next day. I recognized his truck. I assume B must have called him. He drove into the woods on a service road, a half-mile. I followed him from a distance and watched him set up his blind in a tree. He returned to the truck and pulled a gun case out of the toolbox in the bed. When he climbed into the blind, it was a bit surprising, like an optical illusion almost, that it could contain him or that the tree could support him. Mr. Beavis tried to keep the rest of camp functioning as normal. He did warn people that there was one guest present with a license to hunt Bigfoots, and not to be alarmed, and wasn't so sly about how much it had cost the fellow either. A few of the kids ooh-oohed that, but the parents almost uniformly shut it down on the spot. One guy with glasses actually went to the office with his kid, I think thinking it was a gift shop novelty of some sort, but balked when he realized Mr. Beavis really intended to run his Amex for 10 grand. I don't think most of the adults took it as the upsell attempt it was intended to be. One enterprising kid lifted the credit card out of his mom's purse when she wasn't looking. B, nursing his third glass of wild turkey of the afternoon, kept trying to charge it until the kid's mom showed up, still on the phone with the bank. The fat guy stayed out there for 2 nights. On the 3rd day, Jake was in the suit, doing a roam, which is basically where they just walk around the perimeter areas of the park looking for good opportunities to make a pass. At some point, the guy must have moved his blind because when I heard the shot ring out, it was from almost the total opposite side of the camp. My heart sank when I heard it. Then there was another, and a third. Apparently, Jake started running after the first, which hit a tree near his head, and recognized right away that it wasn't a paintball. He zigged and zagged, and the guy missed his next 2 shots as well. He did, it is confirmed, shit in the suit, but nobody could ever bring themselves to really give him any kind of hard time over it. By the time Mr. Beavis took the golf cart out to talk to the guy, he was already gone. Jake kept asking, demanding, to know what Mr. B had known. He apologized profusely, said the guy must have just been a psycho. There's no accounting for psychos, he said. Jake eventually agreed to drop it if Mr. B would end the paintball pilot program and also let him host an evening backyard wrestling promotion at the camp. Reluctantly, he accepted the terms. Jake had been telling me for several weeks about wanting to put on some kind of show at the camp so everyone could see him rap. He'd released 3 mixtapes as The Cunning Linguist, and now would perform his version of the Star-Spangled Banner before the match. I officially decided to leave a few days after the gun incident. I would put my all into the holiday weekend, see if the ship could not be righted, my investment rescued, or at least my losses mitigated. And then I would make the trip back to Ohio and face the music like a man. I'd graduate high school, maybe start at a community college, at least for some of my gen ed stuff. Whatever. It was what it was. I was in the office by myself one night, finishing up with some accounting stuff, when Raymond Bolivar walked in the front door. I hadn't even heard him pull into the lot. The little bell made me jump. He wore a scraggly handlebar mustache and a leather duster, and his eyes never left me as far as I could tell, but they were too intense. I could only meet them for a second or two at a time. Clear and burning with a single-minded focus. "Are you the proprietor's nephew?" he asked. I could smell him from across the counter. Pungent. No, I said. I didn't mean to answer it like that, all snotty. I was genuinely surprised by the question. I am an owner, though. He grumbled something I didn't understand. Squatches pass through these parts? All the time, I said. Pack of 'em been lingering in the area all season. He introduced himself and said that he'd been tracking a band north of Manitowoc last fall. He said that they must have migrated down here. He speculated that they may have been following a food source or were perhaps fleeing habitat loss. He asked me for more information, mostly specifics about the Bigfeet, what time of day we saw them, how many, any notable behaviors they exhibited, or markings, patterns, stuff like that. Then he thanked me for my help and left. By the time I went to bed that night, I'd forgotten all about him. Thursday before Labor Day. By this point, about half the staff had already worked their last day and collected their check for the summer. Add to that, a handful of the people who were left refused to put on the suits after the whole paintball/real gun incident. So that's how I ended up in the suit after all, as a rookie nonetheless, without a drop of the pomp and gravitas I'd been promised my first day on the beat. It was almost a sad moment in the shed getting dressed. Bittersweet at the very least. Shauna's parents were coming to pick her up in the morning. She wouldn't even be there to see it through to the end. Not that we'd ever really so much as held hands after that night with the fireworks. Back in June, it had all seemed so impossibly long, week after week, stretching out before me. It felt like I was committing to a whole new life with the same sort of abandon you take jumping into a cold lake. But looking back, even then, it was already such a green blur. Mosquitoes, campfire smell, dew on the grass at dawn, thunder and raindrops on the gray lake in the morning, and sun and blue skies in the afternoon, when the air was so damp it would just sit at the bottom of your lungs like swamp water. I was walking in the woods and thinking about all of it. The summer that was and all the other summers that it hadn't turned out to be. And I was thinking so much that I occasionally forgot about the Bigfoot suit I was wearing or the job I was supposed to be doing, despite how warm it was in there, despite sweating through my shirt. Most of the others were running around double time, trying to pull everything together and spiff it all up for the one last hurrah, while at the same time preparing what could be prepared for the long fall and winter. So, all things considered, I wasn't complaining. If there was one thing B had drilled into me, it was the buck and where it stopped, which was, as an owner, with me. There's always stuff that needs doing, and you might think being an owner means you're too good to do them, but it actually means that at the end of the day, nobody is going to do them but you. Funny how the buck never required him to clean the bathroom, though. I was just starting to focus, to recenter myself in my body. I had to register at least one sighting. And shit, if I could stop moping for a second and put the other stuff aside, maybe I could actually have fun doing it. It took me several seconds to register what had happened. I heard the clinking first, like something from out of another reality, too metallic for the deep woods. I knew that my foot had hit something weird, but it was hard to tell through the costume. I thought it must have just been a rock or something. And then, like a lightning bolt from a clear blue sky, just white hot, searing pain in my shin, shooting up and down my leg. I collapsed, reaching for it with both hands, not having any idea what I was going to find. It was a bear trap, biting into my calf. I bit down on my tongue at the same time and tasted blood. I made a noise that I've never made in my life before or since, and probably couldn't replicate if I tried. I rocked back and forth, trying to pry the jaws apart. The pain came in terrible, pulsing, paralyzing waves that racked my body, stiffened my muscles with agony. Any progress against the pressure of the jaws only redoubled the pain when my fingers would inevitably slip or give out and the metal teeth would snap back down the inch or two I'd managed to move them. I flailed onto my back, grasping at the mud with bent fingers. It was like my upper half was trying to tear itself away from the pain. I didn't even hear the guy's footsteps until he was practically on top of me. Raymond Bolivar, in full camouflage, covered in tactical gear. He stood there a moment, looking down at me, chewing his gum. There was grease paint smeared across his cheeks. "You don't look like the son of a bitch killed my brother," he said. "But maybe you're his brother." He unslung the rifle from his back, giant scope gleaming in the sunlight. I tried to say something, but my tongue was already swelling up, and the mask had been pushed halfway around my face. I reached back, tried to undo the zipper so I could get to the buckles that held the head to the torso. He nudged me with one combat boot and rolled me onto my stomach. I felt the barrel of the gun press into the back of my neck and started to pee. The suit would be going to the cleaners in 4 days anyways. I tried to shout something, anything, and my terror sounded somewhat less than human. The next thing I heard was a zipper. Like when I first heard the steel trap clinking in all those twigs and leaves, it was so far outside of what I was expecting that my mind had to try to catch up and piece together a whole new reality. Was he unzipping my suit? I didn't feel any air on the back of my neck, but what else could it be? He was unmasking me. It was like the end of an episode of Scooby-Doo. I looked back over my shoulder and realized that there was one other zipper I had not accounted for. "I'ma give to you just what he give to him." I started screaming. I'm sure it didn't sound like English, but it must have been human enough to make him see the seam running around my neck. "What in the hell?" He bent down and ran a hand over my fur. I watched a drop of sweat run down his nose and fall onto the small of my back. He uncovered my zipper and gave it a tug and hung his head with a great sigh. He tossed the rifle aside. What he said next I will never forget. When I'm addressing foreign dignitaries at great dinners of state and signing laws to change the lives of millions, I suspect the words will from time to time creep back up from my subconscious, a little joke on the forebrain. He rocked back on his heels and sat with his face pressed into his hands and growled in frustration. For what felt like 5 minutes, he just kept repeating, "Not again, not again, not again." Once he got it together, he removed the trap and helped me hobble out to his truck. My heart started racing when I had to put my arm around the guy, as if I had any other choice. I couldn't look down at my leg. If I did, I would become woozy and collapse. I'd managed one glimpse, right when the trap came off, and it looked way worse than I'd expected. I was dripping blood onto his floor mat, and he was glancing over at me nervously between glances up at the road. It was starting to get dark. It was slow going at first on account of the roads within the campground being so winding and narrow. I was relieved when we finally made it out to the main road. Not a D in sight except at the end of campground and guaranteed. He used his turn signal, which would have made me laugh if I'd not been trying so hard not to pass out. He was really hunched over the wheel. I still remember the way the highway looked under his headlights. What happens next can probably never make it into my presidential memoirs. At least not if I want them to be, well, presidential. In my heart of hearts, I wish that it could, that we lived in a world where the stigma around these sort of things wasn't what it is, that it wasn't seen as taboo to even talk about them in polite company. Alas. We drove a little ways down the road, and it started to rain. He turned on the wipers. I stared at the console, hoping he would turn on the radio. He finally went for it, but it was only to turn the air conditioning down a step. And then he looks up, gasps, brakes slam, squeal, wham! We hit something. We both get whipped forward in our seatbelts. It was brown, like chestnut fur, and big, like 8 feet tall. I only saw it as a flash in my periphery, caught in the headlights for half a second. I leaned forward and got a brief look at it after the accident, but I couldn't discern much more than that. I think we'd clipped him, and he was lying on the road near the front driver's side wheel. I caught the briefest glimpse of his face from the oddest of angles. I think that the curvature of the windshield might have distorted it a bit, but I don't know. I think he had green eyes. He scrambled off the road on all fours, clearly wounded, into some tall grass. So I didn't have a clear view of it, I confess. But when he made it into the woods, he was walking on 2 legs. Take that for what you will. I saw Raymond's hand hovering over the door handle. His gun was resting against the seat between us. He looked over at me and then back out the window at the depression in the vegetation where the thing had trampled. He squeezed his hand into a fist and then bit down on it. I might have imagined it, but I believe he was trembling ever so slightly. After a very deep and intentional breath that made my blood go a bit cold, he took his foot off the brake and continued to drive all the way to the hospital. He kept checking in his mirrors, even miles down the road. He never did turn on the radio. I'd really like to know what we saw that night. Maybe when I'm president, they'll tell me.